Hey there, welcome back to the workshop. Today we're going to go over the concept of running gauntlets. In Dungeons and Dragons, there are obviously dungeons, boss battles, and various scenarios that you put your players against. I've devised my own kind of different scenario that I've called gauntlets, and I'm going to run you through how I set them up. Three core features make up what gauntlets are and diversify them a little from how I would use dungeons and raw battle scenarios. The first of which is objective-based gameplay. So if you look at the map, which I have left on screen, this is an example of what I would use as objective-based gameplay. And this is a scenario in which my players would generally probably call either Total War or XCOM. Their favorite version is XCOM, and it's essentially that these are the players down here, these three tokens that we use, and they've collected a number of allies to come with them, and they are storming an area which has enemies within it. But there are some civilian buildings in which friendly or neutral NPCs could be housed within. And the objective of this gauntlet, or at least stage one of the gauntlet, is that they need to go in and rescue the civilians while defeating the enemies who may or may not be seeking to kill the civilians and add a second layer of difficulty on top of what they're actually here for. A very crucial aspect of what makes a gauntlet different from, simply rushing into a town to defend it from being attacked is that that is a side objective. The main objective of the gauntlet is something at the very end of what they are doing. So in this scenario, there's this whole map, but there are two other maps with an end goal in sight to what they're trying to do. In this encounter, this is what I've called the Battle of Radari, and the players are here with a player-based army behind them, seeking to take this fortress back from the enemy, with the final encounter being against the leader of the army. So why is that not simply just, a battle? Well, the reason I'm framing it as a gauntlet is that it's a specific way in which I run combat encounters. In a gauntlet encounter, the goal is for the players to go through a number of difficult scenarios that make them feel heroic. A lot of times when you play high level characters, you have this situation where you either steamroll through the boss or you fight against these like almost bullet spongy enemies that just don't die because it's an arms race between you and the DM. What gauntlets are for is to counteract that issue by putting the players through a series of different maps usually, or just a very long single map in which tons of enemies appear like swarms or hordes from previous eras of D&D. But it's not simply just I'm fighting 500 dudes. It's I'm weaving my way through the city streets, moving up onto the castle walls, and penetrating into the actual fortress. It's a layer by layer series of progression that lets them feel like they're really achieving something, not simply getting a chance to kill 20 to 50 enemies per map. Just the final part about objective-based gameplay is it's crucial to say that you don't simply have to have a scenario where the players are rescuing an NPC. There are lots of different ways to do things. They could have a side objective where if they reach a certain point, there is rare treasure that they could find, or a puzzle that they need to do in a certain amount of time. There could be a cursed object that they need to use or withdraw from the enemy because it will do something or create a secondary boss. Or you can simply have item recovery. Perhaps there is an item that is going to be destroyed or is very fragile and they need to get it out of the location. The point of the gauntlet is that you do not simply allow players to go from A to B without stressing that, hey, you could also do C. It is there to provide a little bit more gameplay rather than simply progressing through a dungeon and reaching, the end point. So we've moved on to the second map. Our players are here now, and we're going to talk about the second point of Gauntlets, which I think is crucial for me, is that they always have a story or emotional beat to them. As I mentioned earlier, this is the battle for Radari. They're storming an island fortress and trying to liberate it from the enemy empire. So there's an overarching narrative of why they're here, but you can add in kind of other emotional layers. For the players, a big part of why they might rush to the ends and try and really be the vanguard in this push is that the army they've brought with them are filled with characters that have helped them through the story, and they might need to use these soldiers to push in against the enemy empire later, or they simply want to save NPCs that they're friends with, which could be at risk. So this kind of adds a not real pressure in making them rush through the game, but a pressure in their characters' heads of, oh, well, if we don't go forwards enough, then perhaps the wizard that we met earlier in the campaign might be pushed too hard by enemy forces, or we might have too many casualties. It's a kind of not something that is actually affecting their gameplay. It is not affecting the scenario they are currently in, but is something that works in the back of their minds to really help the roleplay element. And a part of what I want Gauntlets to be is a roleplay element. Sure, they are ultimately here to wear down the player's resources and get them towards this final encounter, but we want them to do so in a way which feels like they're actually achieving something and not simply going through a slog of enemies and different scenarios to wear them down to having minimal resources. So I can only really talk about this in the scenario that I've prepared as context, but to continue kind of elucidating on how you would do a story or narrative aspect to a gauntlet. In this scenario, you might be like, well, okay, I can only build in so much, story stuff to happen on the screen as is, and I get that. If you look at the map, this is the internal part of the fortress. It's not the actual main citadel building. It's the kind of town inside the castle walls. So you see like some buildings that are in decent condition, but some are more dilapidated. There's a tower in the middle which has these cages, one filled with blood, and that's kind of more environmental storytelling. Have the people here been mistreated? What's going on there. It's things the players can discover and that you as a DM can either just flow off in the moments and go, I'm making it up, but here's something that really seems to get them to react to, or that you can prepare to dig into later on. The same goes with you can do aspects of storytelling that you don't have to dig into and have kind of show on the screen. You can have rumors of activity off screen by using sounds or, the rush of soldiers coming in from some battle that they haven't seen on the map. Um, and they tell of this soldier's wounded, or oh, we've taken the north side, or there's artillery fire in the distance, fireballs streaming through the sky. It gives an illusion of the bigger conflict that they're involved in and builds up the grandeur of the moment for the players. And that's what you want them to do. You want them to get lost and immersed in what is going on. A gauntlet should be a way to create a bigger scenario where the players are led through a kind of railroaded set route, but you're giving them the illusion of a kind of massive open scenario that they are leading through. So we finally reached the last map and the third point of Gauntlets, which is big final moments. Our players have reached the actual citadel. They're working their way into this kind of battlefield and what's going on at the end. They're going to go from here all the way to here to encounter the final enemy or whatever you set up for them. So, why is a big final moment an important third aspect of Gauntlets? Well, ultimately, they are narrative first encounters, designed generally for higher level players in a stream of combat encounters that drain their resources and then test them. It's no fun to go through all this slog of, objectives and dealing with tons of monsters without there being a big reason for why you're doing it. If the players burst through this fortress with whatever soldiers they have left, they fight through the guards on the right, on the left, they deal with traps, they push all the way in, and eventually they reach the boss's room, or the room in which there is this special item or a piece of lore that you really want them to know. There should be a payoff. You're not setting your players up to just go into a boss encounter with minimal resources where they're going to get TPK'd, but you are pushing them to the limit. You're giving them a scenario where they have to kind of use each of their resources to the maximum effect. If you have a wizard who has minimal spell slots left, but there are 10 enemies in front of them, and a fireball in a well-placed spot will really kind of protect the party's HP, that makes that fireball really count. It makes it super important in the moment, and it kind of teaches the players that resource management is, a big part of this encounter. The more resources they burn early on, the more like strained that final moment is going to feel. Not necessarily a boss, but perhaps there is a skill check where they reach the end of the castle and okay, there's no boss. We delete the boss. But the castle starts to crumble around them because the enemies have set up a trap in their exit. They don't want them to get whatever they've left behind. So the players scramble. They grab what information they can from the tables. They grab maps. They grab, treasure or special magic items, and they run and they have to, leap off the balcony or descend the castle as it's crumbling around them, making various checks using what spells, resources, health they have left to survive it. Which is why going through everything they've done so far makes the last aspect of the gauntlet really important. You want to have it be the payoff of everything you've done. A gauntlet is, in effect, like running a mini campaign arc. It's a big build up to if you've created, let's say, a whole kind of map zone where they've gone from village to village, and you want them to eventually get to, the big bad evil guy and their setup encounter. A gauntlet is a way to give that real, like, emphasis. It's not just one room fight, a dungeon or lair they work through. It's the lair and the dungeon that it's inside, but also the outer layer. It's the working up the like driveway to the villain's manor. It's the lead up and the actual thing. That's what Gauntlet should be. Yeah, I just wanted to explain this concept. It's something that I've had in my mind and I've run a couple of times with my players for a while now. They seem to really enjoy gauntlets as a kind of sparing thing that you throw in every now and then as their big, stuff is happening. It's led to this final moment and they're pushing through for this goal. I think it's a really nice way to really push a story based moments because generally dungeons are, you're going in for the loot. It's a, dungeon crawl for a reason, or fighting a boss can just be, an encounter where the enemies are just quite tough, or it's, a giant cave troll or something. It's not story focused, and obviously the D&D community is quite huge. I'm sure someone has come up with this before, but I wanted to give a name to it and the kind of things that I like to do. So I hope this is helpful. I hope that this is something that maybe you put in your games. Let me know if you do, and yeah, that's all for now. I'll see you in the next video.